You think you know the story of the British bike industry. You think Honda killed it, but you're missing the real reason. This isn't about Japan winning. This is about Britain losing. If a company makes the world's best engine, why would they stop building it? Why would they kill their own champion? We're going inside the factory walls to show you the fatal 3 decisions. Was it bad luck or pure corporate poison? Stick around. The truth is worse than you think. Now let's get something straight. The BSA empire was not a corner shop. It wasn't a small business that got unlucky. This company was the king. Why did this matter? Because when BSA fell, it was like a major fault line opening in the earth. It took the whole British industry down with it. If you rode a bike in the 50s and 60s, a BSA or a Triumph was the dream. They were fast. They were cool. They were the muscle that powered a new kind of freedom. In their best years, the BSA group was selling 80% of all the bikes Britain sent overseas. That means 8 out of 10 bikes in America, Canada, and Australia had a British engine. That is global domination. That is an empire. What we are going to do now is simple. We are going to find the bomb. You see, the truth is that the seeds of their own destruction were planted right here during their greatest triumphs. This whole tragedy was a failure of vision, a failure of ego. The bosses got too comfortable. They became arrogant. They didn't see the threat from Japan coming. They just laughed at it. Think of it like this. BSA was a heavyweight boxing champion. They had the power, the money, the fans. Then a fast, reliable challenger walks in. What does the champion do? He ignores the challenger. He keeps eating cheeseburgers. He believes his old reputation will save him. How did they do this to themselves? Over the next 18 minutes, we will trace 3 specific, fatal choices, 3 distinct times when the engineers presented genius and the management replied with delusion. We're tracing the corporate poison that started this collapse. It began with the single most reckless act of industrial vandalism in history. To understand the size of the mistake, we have to start at the moment they were strongest. At the moment they killed their champion. We are looking for the moment the poison took hold, the moment the arrogance became fatal. It happened in 1963. The BSA Gold Star was their heart. It was their champion. If you knew speed, you knew this bike. It was a single-cylinder legend. It was raw, loud, and it won every race it entered. In America, this bike meant performance. It was a badge of honor. It was the best thing they made. Now here is the huge mistake. The managers looked at the books. They saw the Gold Star was complicated to build. It needed skilled hands. They wanted things to be simple. They wanted to save money. So they made a decision. It wasn't an engineering decision. It was an accounting decision. They killed the Gold Star. They stopped making their best bike. They did this to push their newer, simpler unit construction twins, bikes like the A65. They said, this is the future, but they didn't understand. They killed the engine to save money, but they killed the soul of the brand for nothing. The old way of thinking says they had to simplify the lineup. That's smart business. By stopping production of the Gold Star, the engineers and the public saw the sign. It was a giant billboard that read, "We don't care about performance anymore. We only care about cost." They threw away their crown jewel just to make the factory run smoother. This is like a top chef suddenly deciding to close his 5-star restaurant to open a fast food burger joint. He makes a quick dollar, but he loses all his reputation. Think about the high-end buyer, the racer, the speed demon in California. They saw BSA drop their champion. Who stepped in to fill that high-performance gap? The upstarts. European brands first, and soon the efficient, hungry Japanese. BSA had signaled, we are no longer the best. They traded a legend for a spreadsheet. They gained a little cash now, but lost the entire future market. But this was only the first cut. The second, and arguably most contemptuous, act of arrogance was committed not on a motorcycle, but on an insult of a vehicle. We saw how they murdered their champion, the Gold Star, but that only hurt the company's heart. This second mistake hurt the wallet. It was a massive waste of money. At the same time BSA was killing their best bike, something scary was happening. Honda was starting to sell millions of small, cheap, reliable bikes. These weren't powerful bikes. They were commuters. They were quiet. They didn't leak oil. You didn't have to kick them 1,000 times to start. They were selling everywhere, even in the United States. BSA's managers should have been terrified. Instead, they laughed. They said, "That's not a real motorcycle." That was the arrogance. The managers decided they needed a Honda killer. But they wouldn't build a quality small bike. No, that was beneath them. They built this, the Ariel 3. It was a strange three-wheeled moped. It had a tiny engine. It leaned when it turned, but it was complicated. It was awkward. It was half-hearted. It was designed to solve a problem that nobody had. This thing was supposed to be their answer. It was their attempt to get easy money from the commuter market without putting in the real work. BSA spent a huge amount of money building this machine. They poured nearly £2 million into the Ariel 3. £2 million. That money should have gone to fixing their main twin engines. That money could have paid for modern factories. It could have paid to put an electric start on their main bikes. But they put it all into this three-wheeled flop. It was a failure. It was quickly dropped. The money was just gone. This is like a general who has $1 million to buy new guns, but instead he spends it all on a fancy new uniform. He looks good, but his army can't fight. This was the belief-breaking point. BSA's name was once gold, but by building a terrible, expensive failure like the Ariel 3, they signaled to the world they can no longer build a reliable machine. They had bled the company's soul, and they had squandered its treasury. But the final, most unforgivable act of hubris was to look the future directly in the eye and laugh. They killed their best engine. They wasted millions on a failed moped. But this last mistake, this was the end of the line. It was a total refusal to see the future. In 1969, the Japanese challenger finally showed its true strength. Honda released the CB750. This bike was a masterpiece. 4 smooth cylinders. It had a disc brake that actually stopped you. And the final shocking feature, the electric start. You just pushed a button. BSA management saw this machine and did not panic. They were snobs. They thought they were better than this new technology. One British executive reportedly called the CB750 just a piece of Jap rubbish. This was the core arrogance. They believed that oil leaks, bad electrics, and the Kickstarter were part of the real riding experience. They thought their British character was stronger than Japanese technology. BSA was not just competing against a newer engine. They were fighting against time itself. I remember those old engines. They were beautiful, but you always needed a few wrenches and a lot of patience. If you wanted to start it, you had to kick it. Hard. The new bikes? You turned the key and pushed a button. No fuss. BSA was still using old machines in their factory, equipment that was left over from World War II. They had no money for new, modern tools. The Japanese had brand new, robotic factories that built bikes that never leaked. BSA was fighting a space shuttle with a biplane. Here is the heartbreaking, belief-breaking point. BSA was too slow and too poor to compete. The engineers did have an answer. They designed a masterpiece, the BSA Fury 350. It was modern, it was double overhead, cam. It was everything they needed to fight back. But the managers were so lost in their financial chaos and their own pride. They didn't fund the Fury. It died on the drawing board. It was the last best chance to save the brand. They starved the solution to death. The king was too arrogant to lead. The engineers were silenced. The champion was dead. This is where the BSA story should end, a tragedy of corporate self-immolation. But the ending is far more cynical, because when the empire finally collapsed, the betrayal was only just beginning. We traced the poison. We saw the 3 acts of corporate arrogance: the murder of the Gold Star, the waste on the Ariel 3, and the refusal to fund the Fury. That arrogance was the cancer. It ate the empire alive. But the final act of this tragedy, that was pure, cold political calculation. The company was collapsing. The factories were bleeding money. The British government decided they had to step in. They pretended this was a rescue. They said they were saving the industry. The government forced the remains of BSA, Triumph, and Norton into one messy company, Norton Villiers Triumph, or NVT. This wasn't a rescue. This was a fire sale. It was a political move to save face. They didn't care about the brilliant engineers or the working men. They just wanted to manage the disaster. The managers had failed the workers. Now the government failed them too. The final insult was that the assets of the great BSA empire were simply stripped away. When they tried to close the famous Triumph factory at Meriden, the workers fought back. They occupied the factory. They slept there. They stood up for the bikes the bosses had betrayed. Think of it like this. A captain runs his ship into an iceberg through sheer stupidity. Then the government shows up, not with lifeboats, but with tow trucks to steal the expensive furniture before the ship sinks. That is NVT. The arrogance of the managers killed the market, but the political arrogance of the government delivered the final blow. They proved that the value of the machinery and the skills of the workers were less important than making the numbers look tidy on a political ledger. It wasn't just a business that died, it was a whole way of life. The sound of those engines, the smell of the oil, that was part of the American street scene. It was real, and the men in the suits killed it because they were too proud to change. The bikes are now legends. The factory is dust. But here's the question that should keep you awake at night. How many geniuses are betrayed, and how many revolutions are suppressed, not by the challenger, but by the arrogance of the very people charged with their protection? We started this story asking why the king killed his own champion. Now you know. The great BSA empire died because the leaders refused to look outside the window. They paid the price for their pride. The real lesson here is simple. Arrogance is always the most expensive luxury. If you owned one of these great British bikes, or if you ever dreamed of it, tell me your story. What was the single worst mistake they made? Let me know in the comments below. Stay humble and keep your engine running.